As we look back on the season that was, these are my rankings of the best quarterbacks the SEC had to offer in the 2024 football season. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, turn notifications. Check us out via podcast, wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us across all social media platforms, as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. The following is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use promo code SECU for $20 off your first purchase. Again, guys, that's our friends at Game Time. Promo code SECU to get $20 off today. The quarterback position was one of intrigue in the 2024 SEC football season. Some good, some bad, some in between. Today, I give you my 2024 postseason quarterback rankings as we take a look at some of the best signal callers the SEC had to offer in the season that was, as we pull up each of my selections. And we will start at the bottom of the list at number 16. And it seems like Kentucky finished last in everything this season. I got Kentucky's Brock Vandagriff at number 16. I mean, again, guys, you look at the numbers, and this one's pretty self-explanatory, right? Kentucky had a disastrous season that was led by one of the worst offenses in the conference, and certainly that started with their quarterback, Brock Vandagriff, a guy that just never lived up to the hype, right? Was the five-star billing, came over from Georgia. Bright spots were few and far between. He even lost his job late in the season to Cutter Boley, a freshman. So Brock Vandagriff, number 16, feel like that one is pretty self-explanatory, and now you wish him the best because he has retired from the game of football. So Brock Vandagriff again in that 16 spot. At number 15, I've got Michael Van Buren. Obviously, Blake Shapen goes down early in the season at Mississippi State with the injury. I thought Michael Van Buren played pretty well, all things considered, with the talent he had around him and the team he had around him. But I still think number 15 is the right spot for him. He is now since transferred, obviously, to LSU. Looks to probably serve as the backup to Garrett Nussbaum. I think could make that quarterback room kind of interesting. He's going to provide, obviously, some depth and some competition. But Michael Van Buren, what Jeff Lebby did at number 15, obviously Blake Shapen will take back over, we presume, as the starter in Starkville. Guys, at number 14, I've got Oklahoma's Jackson Arnold, who, of course, is now QB1 at Auburn. But for the 2024 season, obviously the starter there at Oklahoma. Loses his starting job for a while to Michael Hawkins, who I guess you could have put on this list. But again, we went with the quarterbacks who ended the season as starters, if you will, and started most of the games. But Jackson Arnold at number 14, and I'll say this about Arnold. I've got him at 14. I think it's well-deserved for what he did in the 2024 calendar year, the 2024 season. I don't think it's all on him, though. I think, obviously, when you look at Seth Luttrell, the offensive system there in Norman, you obviously made a firing and made a change for a reason there if you're Brent Venables. I thought Oklahoma gave up on Jackson Arnold way too early in the season. Obviously, that Tennessee game, they changed him out for Michael Hawkins. The rest is history. A few games later, he comes back in. But it was just, Jackson Arnold kind of was what we thought he might be this season, right? He's a gunslinger. He's going to turn the football over. He's sort of erratic. We'll see if Hugh Freeze, what he can get out of him. I think the kid has got a high ceiling, but can he bring the floor up? That's the big question. Jackson Arnold comes in at number 14 for me. Number 13, I've got Peyton Thorne. And guys, this is actually, if you'd have told me Peyton Thorne to finish 13th, I would have been a little bit surprised because Peyton Thorne, admittedly, was the guy that I had ranked dead last in the preseason coming into the 2024 season. I was not a Peyton Thorne guy. But if you really read between the lines and you look at the numbers when it comes to Peyton Thorne, he didn't have a bad year. I mean, really did not have a terrible year. Now, granted, he did seem to still have the knack, right? Peyton Thorne, it felt like, would throw an interception or turn the football over in the worst possible times for Auburn. And I don't think any Auburn fans are necessarily shedding a tear that Peyton Thorne is no longer under center. But he was a little bit better than I expected him to be. And again, there were other things that really doomed this team. Hugh Freeze, and I think his play calling, his utilization of the talent they had on that roster in 2024. Of course, it leads to a 5-7 season. But Peyton Thorne at 13, better than I expected him to be in 2024. I'll say that. At number 12, guys, I've got Marcel Reed from Texas A&M. Obviously, Reed takes over the starting job from Connor Wegman. Solid player. I think Marcel Reed, I think the potential is great in 2024. great threat running the football. I think he's still got a ways to go as a passer. Did some nice things at times for sure, throwing the football and everything, but was just okay, I think, in 2024. I think he was okay. Now, granted, going into 2025, my preseason quarterback rankings that'll drop at some point, I think he'll probably be a little bit higher up the list. I'd almost guarantee he'll be higher than 12. But for what he did in 2024, 12 feels right to me. At number 11, I've got Brady Cook. Again, Brady Cook was solid. He wasn't great. He was solid. I'll give him that. He was solid. It's weird because I think higher of Brady Cook than I have him on this list, but there were a lot of other good signal callers in the SEC that were more dynamic and did more things and led more potent offenses than Brady Cook did. So I've got him at 11th. Great leader, heart and soul of Mizzou. Helped get him back to a 10-win season. You give him a lot of credit for that. Balled his ass off out in the bowl game, but 11 for Brady Cook feels right for me. Now, this is where things might get interesting. At number 10, I've got Nico Iamaleava. Now, this is a lot lower than I expected to have Nico, but once again, and I think you put a lot on his offensive line. They didn't protect him at times, but there's a reason Tennessee leaned on their running game and their defense. Nico just never really lived up to the hype in the 2024 season that people expected from him. Really good player, and I'm excited for him moving forward. But in 2024, the offense was just kind of meh, and we were waiting week after week after week. When is Nico going to grow up? When's he going to start making these big throws downfield? And I was at that game in Knoxville against Alabama. I thought you saw him finally kind of take some steps forward. Hey, the other thing, too, I'm giving Nico knocking Nico. What about his receivers? They didn't make plays. I mean, the wide receiver position, you could argue there wasn't a more disappointing position group in the conference this season than Tennessee's wide receivers. So I've got Nico at another 10, like all these other players, though, right? There's other things, right? The quarterback gets too much of the credit, too much of the blame. But for what he did in 2024, I think 10 is right for Nico. Is he a better player than 10? Sure. But based off what I saw on the field, 10 is where he deserves to be. At number 9, I've got Arkansas's, Taylon Green. Taylon Green and Bobby Petrino. Green, kind of like Arkansas, very up and down, very erratic. At times, I think my friend Cole Thompson phrased it, Taylon Green is that 2 a.m. cigarette that you just can't quit. I mean, that's kind of what it feels like. He's just like that thing that, like, every time you're about to sell the stock on Taylon Green, he'd have some sort of game where he would just reel you back in and make you feel good again. So very erratic, very inconsistent, but when he was good and when he was on, those flashes, you saw it, he was really, really good. And that's why he's ahead of Nico. I don't know that Nico really ever had that game where it's like we saw the flashes of the ceiling and what the potential is. Most complete game probably was against Vanderbilt, and I will say against Ohio State, he was the only thing that tried to give them a chance with his running ability. But Taylon Green, a player I really like. And I think, guys, he's probably going to be one of the top signal callers going into the 2025 season in the SEC, whether you love the guy, hate the guy, whatever it might be. Guys, at number 8, I've got Vanderbilt's Diego Pavia. I wanted to list Diego Pavia higher. I really, really did. Again, though, when you look at some of the other names we'll get to in a second, 8 feels right for Diego Pavia. But, man, in regards to pizzazz, for flair, leaders on this list, there may be none better than Pavia. What he did, I mean, bringing Vanderbilt to a 7-win season, beating Georgia Tech in the bowl game, obviously engineering the win over Alabama, going on the road and beating Auburn, beating Hugh Freeze again. And I love the fact we've got Diego Pavia back in 2025. What he may lack in size and at times accuracy, and just if you want to nitpick his game, fine. Is this guy going to be a first rounder in the NFL draft? Is he going to be an NFL quarterback? Probably not. But the kid has guts. The kid has heart. He's a winner. All the intangibles. Nobody on this list, I think, has a more than Diego Pavia. And again, number 8 for me on this list. Number 7, I've got Jalen Milroe. Man, the curious case of Jalen Milroe. This is another one where I don't know many Alabama fans that are shedding a tear all that much that Jalen Milroe, that era has come to an end in Tuscaloosa. It was an interesting fit with Kalen DeBoer, I think. I don't know that Jalen Milroe was ever really the quarterback that Kalen DeBoer wanted from a schematic standpoint, from a style standpoint. I think it was more one of those things. Obviously, you're taking over for Nick Saban. I think it could have really broken up the locker room had you gone with someone other than Jalen Milroe. But, I mean, you look at Milroe's game. When he played really well, Bama won. And when he played poorly, they lost. And, again, I was in Tampa and got to see firsthand watching Jalen Milroe, the early turnovers in that game. I mean, heck, that game alone was a microcosm of what his career was and really his 2024 season was in Tuscaloosa. Early on in that game, he's terrible. Then he comes back late, makes some big throws, gets him back in the game. But, you know, I saw in person this season the best of Jalen Milroe. I got to see that first half against Georgia where I felt like Jalen Milroe was the best player in college football, the most dynamic player in college football. And then you see a game like the Oklahoma game, and it's hard to believe that's the same guy. So that's why I think 7 is right, though, kind of right there middle of the pack. Because when he's at his best, the ceiling, you could argue nobody else's is higher. But, man, the floor was just all over the place in 2024. What could have been, you feel like, with Jalen Milroe, you know, had he been able to play better on the road in Norman, play better in the bowl game against Michigan, obviously. But, yeah, Jalen Milroe kind of all over the place, like many of these signal callers were in 2024. Speaking of another one, number 6, I got Georgia's Carson Beck. This might feel a little bit low to some. He finished the season on a high note. Now, of course, is Miami's QB1 going into 2025. But, yeah, I mean, Carson Beck was, you know, he got hot late in the season. But, I mean, you got to remember what he did early where I called him a liability for Georgia's offense, and I think he was. I mean, some of the throws he made, guys, you know, I was able to, you know, I went to a few Georgia games, obviously, and I sat and I was down his line of sight a few times, and you just sat there and you're like, what is he looking at? Where's he throwing the football? Again, Carson Beck was another guy. We put it all on him. His receivers did him no favors. His offensive line was makeshift at times. He didn't have a running game to lean on. But at the end of the day, you know what comes with the position, especially playing it in the SEC. And some of the throws, again, that he made were outrageous. I mean, triple coverage. Nobody's open, like right to the guy. So Carson Beck at number 6 for me, very up and down. He did finish the season on a strong note. And, you know, Carson Beck probably got knocked a little bit too much. But, again, 6 feels right when it comes to these power rankings, comes to these postseason rankings, I should say. At number 5, I've got Texas's Quinn Ewers. Again, this is one I think Quinn probably caught way too much flack, but the 4 guys ahead of him were more dynamic. Just bottom line. They were better players in 2024. Quinn Ewers wasn't bad. He wasn't bad. But it was always like you watched Quinn Ewers and you were always wanting more. You were like, God, there's got to be like another gear in there. And a lot of folks will look at Steve Sarkisian. They'll look at some of his play calling. You know, it was the dink and dunk and, you know, so many fans complaining about the short passing game and when's he going to throw it deep, stretch the field. We saw him do that in the college football playoff. And again, Quinn Ewers is going to be remembered as a top 5 quarterback in Texas history. I've seen some Texas fans think he's a top 3 quarterback in Texas history. He's also the guy that really helped pull Texas out of the depths, get them to back-to-back playoffs, get them to back-to-back Final Four finishes. But there's always going to be that thing where it's like Quinn Ewers, there was a lot of frustration with the Quinn Ewers tenure. There was. I mean, just talking to Texas folks, this comes directly from them. A lot of frustration when it comes to what they saw from number 3. So, again, top 5 quarterback in the SEC in 2024, really good player, but the 4 ahead of him, I think, were more dynamic. Getting into number 4, I got Florida's DJ Lagway. You talk about a dude I'm super high on, really giddy about, one of the best signal callers returning in 2025. Man, what DJ Lagway did for Florida. The way he really provided a shot in the arm for that program. Obviously, Graham Mertz goes down with the injury. He takes over, and, I mean, the rest is sort of history, right? I mean, what he can do with his legs. Kid's got a huge arm, obviously. You know, he helps engineer wins over LSU, Ole Miss down the stretch, beats his rival in Florida State. They beat Tulane in the bowl game. You lead Florida to an 8-win season. There's a lot of optimism right now in Gainesville. DJ Lagway is a really, really big reason for that. And if you haven't done so, buy your stock in DJ Lagway because this kid is going to be a star even more than he already is in the SEC. Number 3, guys, speaking of stars, I got South Carolina's Lenoris Sellers at number 3. I mean, there wasn't a player that improved his stock, his ranking, whatever you want to call it, more, I think, than Lenoris Sellers. I mean, coming into the season, it was just unknowns, right? Like we knew the kid had size, he had an arm, he had speed, agility, what have you, the measurables, but you just didn't know what he was going to be. I don't think anybody, even those in Columbia with the most garnet and black of glasses, could have predicted the type of season that kid had. I mean, he was special, man. He was special. Some of the plays he made were just crazy. I mean, the way he was able to evade the pass rush, and he's an absolute load to bring down. He's just throwing guys off of him, making plays. I mean, South Carolina ended their regular season winning 6 straight games, and Rocket Sanders had a big play in that. But Lenoris Sellers meant just as much to that team, if not even more, than Rocket Sanders or anybody else on that offense. I mean, guys, he carried them. He carried them at times offensively. Won the game at Clemson. Won the football game. And again, I think this is a kid as he gets comfortable. He's got the biggest thing of Lenoris Sellers, and they got to get him help on the outside. I still think he can obviously make strides as a passer. I think that's the big thing. Obviously, you want to see him take steps forward. If you're looking at things, take steps forward. A lot of these guys do. A lot of these young quarterbacks take steps forward as a passer. That'll be the big focus for Sellers in 2025, and them obviously surrounding him with weapons. But one of the bright stars in the SEC, one of the young bright stars in all of college football, Lenoris Sellers, is an absolute electric factory on a week-in, week-out basis. And again, is the main reason there's going to be a lot of optimism and maybe even some college football playoff buzz in Columbia this offseason. Guys, at number 2, I've got LSU's Garrett Nussmeier. And this is one that, you know, I like Garrett Nussmeier, but he's so frustrating at times because you know how good he can be. And at times he can play so poorly, and just make poor mistakes. But I tell you, man, when he plays well, he reels you in unlike anybody else out there. I think Garrett Nussmeier of the returners in 2025, and like I mentioned, here in the coming weeks, maybe sooner than that, I will drop my probably way too early quarterback rankings for the 2025 season. Garrett Nussmeier probably has I think he does. I think he's got the highest ceiling of any quarterback coming back in 2025. I mean, this is a dude that can be a first-round draft pick. I really believe that. Kid's got the arm. He's got the moxie. I mean, I saw him in the Ole Miss game firsthand down there in Baton Rouge make some throws that I don't know that anybody else in this conference can make. You saw him in the bowl game, the best version of Garrett Nussmeier. Like, when he's on, guys, nobody can touch him. Can he cut down on the turnovers? That's the big question. If Garrett Nussmeier cuts his turnovers in half from 2024 to 2025, he's probably the best quarterback in college football, if not one of the best. Again, was solid in 2024. There was a lot of frustration. I think LSU's lack of running game didn't help him out at times, but when he was on, he was on. I like Garrett Nussmeier's game a lot. I've got him at number 2 for a reason. I think he was still really, really special in 2024. Just have to cut down on the turnovers. That is the big thing, and that's the thing that drives LSU folks crazy. And at number 1, guys, for my postseason quarterback rankings in 2024, I've got Ole Miss's Jackson Dart. I mean, listen, right now, you look back at the 2024 season, you tell me I got one drive to go win the football game. Who am I taking? Jackson Dart's right up there on the list. And I know Ole Miss, they underachieved. They didn't make the college football playoff. I totally get that, man. I understand. But Jackson Dart was incredible. He was still incredible in the 2024 season. And it's kind of a shame that his season didn't get more recognition or the recognition it deserved because of Ole Miss falling short, losing that game early on at Kentucky, losing that game certainly late at Florida that knocked them out of the college football playoff conversation. But I still think when you look at it, guys, because this was a really difficult year to pin who's the best quarterback in the conference, right? Because everybody had their flaws. Everybody was inconsistent. Everybody was up and down. You could nitpick and poke holes in everybody, right? All these quarterbacks played like crap at some point. I think Jackson Dart was the most consistent. Again, there was nobody that really just head and shoulders separated like, oh, that's easily the best. But to me, Jackson Dart, he was the most consistent, put up the biggest numbers. He thrived, obviously, in that Lane Kiffin offense. And again, if I had a drive to win a game of the quarterbacks in 2024, I'm going Jackson Dart. I'm going Jackson Dart every single time. So Jackson Dart, for me, number 1, the best quarterback in the SEC in the 2024 season. Guys, do you agree with me? Do you disagree? How would you rank the quarterbacks, the signal callers of the SEC in the 2024 college football season? Guys, that's going to do all for me. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Check us out via podcast. Wherever you get your podcast, you can also find us across all social media platforms as well as our website, secunfiltered.com. Until next time, guys, I'm Chris Phillips of SEC Unfiltered. Appreciate each and every single one of you tuning in, and we will catch you on the other side.